Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the Presence Posse Presents. And the Presence Posse is presenting today Presence and Your Relationship with Yourself. And with me today, I have Bobby Cobb and Danielle McMahon, and I'm Miriam Siegel. So I thought we'd dive right in and start with short presentations of ourselves. Actually, for presentations, I'm going to go straight to Danielle, actually. How would you like to say something about yourself?
How would I like to? Today I'm presenting as the farm girl, and I am a horsewoman, and I am very excited to be a part of the Presence Posse and to be here today.
Thank you, Danielle and Bobby.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bobby Cobb. I'm a liberation hypnotist. I work with people to help them overcome limiting belief and debilitating thought loops and our conditioning. And glad you're joining us today. This is one of my favorite hours of the week. It's such a blessing to be able to meet with the whole posse group that we have here. So thanks for tuning in. How about you, Miriam?
Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. My name is Miriam Siegel, and I am a psychotherapist. And I work in many different ways with trying to help people to, realize their dreams, I guess is an easy way to put it, and work past trauma. I have a slogan I say, focus on gain, not pain. It doesn't mean that you don't feel any pain working through old stuff, but that's not where the focus is, because we all would prefer to have a better life, right?
So. Yeah, and isn't that interesting, that little shift when you get somebody to make that, what a powerful impact that can have.
Oh, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. Thank you. And I'm speaking from experience as well. So thank you for mentioning that, Bobby. And while I'm with you, I thought I'd get you to start today. Our topic, as mentioned, is presence and your relationship with yourself. And you have some thoughts about self and relationship with yourself. So I thought I would just start. I'm really looking forward to, I've been looking forward to this all week. You were mentioning this is a favorite hour. This is absolutely a favorite hour for me. But knowing that you had something to say about this, I've really been looking forward to it. So have at it, Bobby.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I do with people in my work is help them to embody the concept that we are spirit having a human experience, or awareness having a human experience. And I was in a forum in a group someplace, and somebody was asking a lot about, how do I tap into my higher self? And there was a really long thread, and I was pretty active in that conversation. And I had written some really long, a couple of long threads trying to explain it, and it seemed to be more confusing to people. And I said, okay, I must be overcomplicating this. So I just thought about it for a little while, and what showed up was the easiest way to get in touch with your higher self is to recognize that there is no lower self. There is only our higher self. And I remember I'm a big Eckhart Tolle fan. I've read his books and I watch him on YouTube and all of that. And I heard him tell the story one time of his awakening experience. I believe he was about 29 years old, and he was suicidal. He was seriously contemplating taking his own life. And he said he was sitting on a park bench and said, I just can't live with myself anymore. And just like that shift from pain to gain, he had a pretty profound internal shift. And, shifts are funny. They can be small little things, the proverbial small hinges that swing big doors. And Eckhart said he just started to contemplate that a little bit, and he goes, I just can't live with myself. And then he started to think, well, who is the I and who is the myself? And for him, contemplating that over whatever time it was that he contemplated that over, made the shift into the realization that, it's all one. There is just one. And so I just kind of feel like sometimes, people, when we're talking about these sort of things, we have the ability to, as human beings, have the ability to massively over complicate things. So, sometimes when I hear people, when I'm working with clients talking about these complicated things, I say to them, my process is really fiercely reductive. So let's start taking some of these things away. So I'm approaching this conversation from that perspective, and I'm interested to see where the conversation goes as well. It's always exciting.
Thank you for sharing that. Danielle, do you have any thoughts after having heard Bobby, or even before having heard Bobby?
Isn't it interesting how we all end up on the same page? I'm reading The Power of Now over again and went through that part where he talks about how is their relationship to self when there is only one, right? So I knew, with Miriam being also a Tole fan, that we would get to that. I didn't know that we would start out with that, but I knew that we would get to that, because that's where we want to be, where there is no disassociation, there is no splintering, there is no other to relate, right? But most of us don't function that way. I would say that most human beings have a voice in their head that's talking to them. So there's a relationship with yourself. And until you learn first to, like, that critic that wants to be all the conditioning that's running through your brain, telling you what you are and what you aren't, and what you should be and what you shouldn't be, and all those things, until you can quiet that to some extent, I think you really do have to focus on having a more positive relationship to yourself. So your self-talk becomes focused forward, becomes focused on what you want, not on what you don't want, who you want to be, not on who you don't want to be. And all of those things are steps along the way to get to that point where you can say, oh, it's just me. Right? Like
Yeah, and it's, go ahead.
totally agree with that's where we're going with relationship, is that there is a oneness, and it's not just a relationship with ourselves, then it goes to relationship with everyone.
Mhm.
Is still one, right? So
It is interesting too how I gave a presentation a while back, and I said, how many of you talk to yourself in a way that you would never talk to another human being on the planet? Raise your
or
hand.
allow
And
anyone else to talk to you,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yes, exactly. Both of those. And like a lot of the hands went up, and many agreed with that. And it is the conditioning, as you pointed out.
Yeah. I tend to, well, I'm going to try to explain this a little bit as clearly as I can from my perspective. And thank you, Danielle, for mentioning that we were going to get to this. I actually wasn't thinking of bringing up Eckhart. I was actually thinking of just talking from my own experience, because I keep forgetting that Eckhart also talks about this, his experience. Once I've had my own, I tend to refer to my own. My experience is not only self-hate, mine was at self-hate or self-loathing, and self-love, and contemplating. There's this theme that goes around about self-care and self-compassion, a lot of the self things. And I was just reflecting on and feeling into, which is the language I use, feeling into this idea of self-hate. And I just didn't understand how it was possible. to hate myself because I am myself. It just didn't make any sense. How do I hate myself when I am myself? And that kind of is the same for me when it comes to self-love. There's no self-love because I am myself. So I don't tend to think in those terms. What I do notice happening is if I don't use them, the majority of people have no idea what I'm talking about. They don't understand my language because they don't know how to relate to that necessarily. And I love what you said, Danielle, about where you start where you are. This is my paraphrasing you, right? Is to sort of learn to love yourself, learn to care for yourself, for if you're not treating yourself well, first place to start is, or a good place to start is to learn to treat yourself well. For me, that is an aspect of who I am. Who I am. It's my expression of being in the world at all. And it has nothing to do with, I don't understand really self-love or self-hate because it just isn't possible. And that was my shift.
Do you understand cognitive dissonance?
Please explain that for everybody. What cognitive
So
dissonance,
it was
just in case.
brought to my attention that if the emphasis is on self-care and self-love and all of these outward things that you can do to show yourself that you care about yourself, if that's layered on top of a feeling of I'm not worthy or I'm not good or I'm not enough or good enough or any of those things, they will cause that cognitive dissonance so that what you're doing doesn't actually land into who you are. Right. So that's the way that I understand it. And even when you get to that point where you know that what is outer is just a reflection of what is inner, so there's still no separation, then you can begin to let those things land. But up until that point, I think that it's very difficult for people to understand that. If you haven't experienced that, if you haven't got to a point where you see it, feel it, and know it for yourself, then the cognition is going to tell you otherwise, right? The illusion is very, very real.
Thank you for explaining that. Yeah. Yes. Thank you for explaining. And I have actually, I think on another Posse talk, I mentioned this when we were talking about, or somebody had asked about 21-day challenges, and that the general understanding is that it takes 21 days to build a new habit. And regarding cognitive dissonance, if you're trying to build a new habit, but it's connected to a habit, or a habit is like a pattern of thought that you agree with, so it's your kind of identity. If you haven't cleared that up and you're trying to put a new habit and it's connected to an old habit, so you don't really believe the new thing you're trying to tell yourself, you still believe the old one, to put it in a simple sort of way, you're actually practicing for 21 days ambivalence. You're training yourself and in ambivalence, instead of tidying up the thought that I'm not good enough, for example. Start there before I try to convince myself that I am. Does that make any sense? I'm not sure if I explained it very clearly.
Right. Or treat myself as if I am when I don't believe it. Like that would cause that ambivalence. Yeah. Or
I've just gotten a message
perpetuate
that my necklace is rattling on my microphone, and take off my necklace, I've been told. So I will take off my necklace and see if that helps. Thank you. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Danielle.
I don't think you did.
I think another thing, if you don't mind me continuing along this idea of Bobby, you're talking about how I would never let another person I would never treat another person that way, the way I sort of talk to myself. And for me, again, that idea of I'm talking to myself, my experience, my understanding, my being shows me that as somebody said that to me at some time or gave me an impression of that at some time. So it's not me talking to me, it's them talking to me.
Mm.
So then I make a choice as to whether I agree with them or not, as to whether I believe them or not. But it's not me talking to me, because how do I do that? As I say, I don't hate myself, I am myself. So that's when I'm being in the world, it's not, oh, I'm terrible. No, I'm not. But somebody thought so at some time and made sure I knew it. When I can connect with that, none of it all just falls away,
Yeah.
because it has nothing to do with me at all. And then I'm free. I'm in my flow. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. And, like the idea of self-love and self-hate and all of that is very prominent. It's out there, and that is definitely part of our conditioning. Our partner, Fred Blum, calls himself a self-inquiry coach. And to me, the self-love or the self-hate or the internal dialogue can be just triggers for a little self-inquiry to, number one of the things that I like to do when I begin working with a new client is get them into the habit of checking in with themselves and seeing how they're doing in a given moment in time, and doing that frequently. And a couple of things that happen through that little exercise using that tool is people begin to notice we go up and down in terms of our mood and our access to internal resources and how we're going to react with another human being. And if we take the moment to just say, okay, how am I right now? And if you're in a little bit of a funk, or if you've got a lot of mental static going on in your head, or your inner dialogue is becoming a choir of not angels. uh, it's a good opportunity to just to self-inquire, say, okay, what's going on right now? How am I doing? Am I showing up as the divine I am, the spirit that is making its way through Earth School, having this human experience? Or am I overly identifying with the body and the mind and kind of getting lost in the illusion or the mirage that's taking place? And I had that a lot back in November when I had a cancer diagnosis, which thankfully I'm working my way through, and the prognosis is awesome. But when it happened, man, my mental static was off the charts. And so I had blood in my urine. I knew from previous experience what that likely meant. I went right to a little walk-in emergency clinic. And one of the things that they did was take my blood pressure. And I don't remember what it was, but it was somewhere around 190 over 105 or something
Yikes.
like that.
Yeah, that's
And
fine.
I looked at the physician's assistant I think I was dealing with and said, should I be here or should I be on my way to the emergency room? And that was a physical manifestation of all of the mental static that I was experiencing. And I don't have high blood pressure at all. I never have had. But in that moment I did, and it stood, it was with me. It was pretty persistent. And in early January, I thought about, maybe I need to get on some high blood pressure medication because this is not doing good. And I talked with a really good friend of mine who is like, what? And he's very anti-allopathic medicine. He's like, why would you do that? That's not good, blah, blah, blah. And then my girlfriend says to me, she goes, don't you have some breathing technique that you can do? Something with that. Well, for 6 weeks, I was so lost in this mental static. And, I was worried. I was manifesting symptoms. And, so I was about to treat the symptom. And thankfully, when Carla said what she's like, it literally was like, duh. I do this all day, every day. But like just in that moment, I was caught up in this shitstorm of worry that was going on in my head. And it was so loud that I couldn't get the space until I had those nice couple of back-to-back interrupts of this pattern that I had fallen into. And, now my blood pressure still is a little bit higher, but I check it regularly and I can breathe it back down to under 120 over 80 within just a few minutes. And I do check that, several times a day. I'm just checking in to see how am I doing. I'm not taking my blood pressure, but I'm just checking in and saying, okay, and how am I feeling? How relaxed am I right now? And there's a guy, I think I've quoted him before. His name is Dr. Bill Pettit. He is a retired psychiatrist now, and he teaches other psychiatrists in the 3 principles psychology. And he is of the opinion that there is one cause and one cure for everything that ails us, and that is taking care of chronic mental stress, which left unabated is going to manifest somehow in our body. It's going to, cause pain or cramps or whatever, rashes, hives, or that type of thing, or it's going to give us emotional challenges. We may get depressed, or it's going to give us mental challenges where we, have this mental static going on, and the voice inside of our head is so loud that we literally can't hear ourselves think. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I'm just going to bring in, I like how you talk about checking in with yourself.
Mm.
Often when I work with people, I will ask, what is actually really going on right now?
Mm.
Because when people go into a trauma loop, where something happens that triggers an old response or a response that's been suppressed, it can feel even as bad. You think you're dying. It can feel that bad, or going to die. Something is that life-threatening, feels that way, when they're actually just sitting in a chair and nothing, talking to me, and nothing else is happening. So it's like, what is actually happening right now? Tell me exactly how many lamps there are. Tell me exactly how many legs you have. I mean, really, really get to the concrete to make it very clear that what's happening is that your brain and your nervous system, they're doing a whole bunch of stuff,
Yeah.
but none of it is actually going on. So, and I think when you talk about your shitstorm, to use your word, it's normal to have that kind of reaction to a life-threatening or potentially life-threatening situation. That's not unusual. It's not necessarily easy to deal with it. Not everybody knows how. Fortunately, you do. Not everybody knows how. That's where we come in, where we can help people with that, thank goodness. But that being aware that I am actually doing this to myself. And when I know that I'm actually doing this to myself, that's quite empowering. Because if I'm doing it to myself, I can stop doing it to myself. I just might need some help to figure out how to stop doing it to myself, but I can. And it might take a bit of practice, but I can.
Yeah. And if you think about it, when we are, when that mental static is real, real high and our emotional state is lower than normal, things can trigger us a lot more easily. And somebody may say something just kind of off the cuff, but it just hits us wrong and we snap at them and go in. Whereas when our mind is a little bit more quiet and our emotional state is a little bit higher, and maybe we're feeling a little bit more zen-like in our mood, somebody can say something pretty rude to us, and we can look at that from the perspective of thinking, like, if either of you guys were to snap at me, I know you so well and I know you as such gentle souls, my immediate reaction would be, wow, what's going on with you? Where did that come from? And there would be no I would have enough compassion and awareness that whatever was happening was not really being directed at me. It was just a manifestation of something going on inside of you. So that would interrupt. But, if I'm in a down, low mental state, if it had been back in November, who knows how I may have reacted to that. And going back to we talk to ourselves in the way we would never talk to anybody else. And I love what Danielle added, that we would never allow anybody else to talk to us that way. We would bow up and defend ourselves. When we are in that a more calm state with more of a quiet mind, it's also much easier for us to be compassionate with ourselves. We're more grounded, and that's the way I think of it. I don't think that I'm being compassionate with myself necessarily. I just look at it as I'm very grounded right now. I'm very relaxed. I'm very comfortable with everything, and it's the same compassion that we would show to one another.
Danielle, can I check in with you for a moment? Do you agree? Do you believe that we would never allow someone else to treat us that way or to speak to us that way? Like, can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I know a lot of people that do let other people treat them very badly. So I'm just curious about, Can you elaborate a bit on that, please?
Well, my first instinct when you say I do know people that allow other people to treat them very badly is they still don't treat them as badly as they treat themselves.
Good point.
They will allow the treatment that they they won't allow anybody to treat them worse than they would treat themselves. But if they have no bottom to that within themselves, then that's the same thing. It's the reflection outside of what they will tolerate within themselves. The other question I've heard people ask, like in a seminar type setting, is would you want your inner dialogue up on the screen for other people to read?
Wow.
And most people don't want their inner dialogue posted for other people to read, right? But if there's an authenticity about the Presence Posse, it's that we know that this is a process, right? It's ongoing. We're in the midst of it. We're helping people that we can because we've experienced a certain amount of presence in our life, a certain amount of peace in our life, a certain amount of understanding, integration, whatever it is that we help people with, right? Like self-inquiry, or my thing is peace. So I found this Mastering the Brain Game course that I teach. And in that's the first thing that we work on is understanding the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And most people don't hang on to those terms. I don't even know which is which, but I know that fight flight we call T-Rex, He's got little short hands and he can't reach things and he gets mad easy and he wants to survive and he hasn't survived. And so all of that, right? And then the other one is dolphin. So we have dolphin brain where we are much more playful. We are much more open and relaxed. And all of those things make it easy for me as I'm listening to Bobby explain, well, you were in T-Rex mode and your girlfriend had to say, come play, right?
Yeah.
Like we have those tools and we can still get caught up in that loop of T-Rex mode and forget that we have access to so much more when we can get ourselves out of that loop and choose to play, choose to be at peace, choose to view life as it comes from within us and shows up out there, right? But if we're not willing to take responsibility for what we're actually hearing, what we're actually allowing from our own brain to our own spirit, or however you want to language has become more difficult for me as I progress in this process instead of less. I used to feel like I was pretty good with language, and now I'm like, I'm just so limited by it that I don't know as well how to express things as I did when I did it within the within cognition, right? Like I can talk about thoughts, I can talk about understanding, but when it comes to talking about, okay, so my relationship with myself now is just to understand that everything outside of me is informing me about inside of me.
Well said.
Thank you.
I had a thought and it suddenly disappeared and it's not coming back. So
the
I'll trust
beginning
it will.
of that was, that we won't allow people to treat us worse than we're willing to treat ourselves. So when we get to that point where we understand their treatment of us is a reflection, then we can change it within us. And that allows us, like you said earlier, more power, right?
Yeah.
And we have to take responsibility to have power. I don't know if that was connected with what you wanted to remember, but
Well, thank you for that. But it was important anyway. At least I heard it as important. So thank you very much for that. It did remind me. Did I just lose it again? No. Okay. This idea of training, right? I hear you say we have to take responsibility. We can train. We've learned a way to be in the world. And if I speak generally, we've learned a way to be in the world, and we can learn another way to be in the world. And so, but it may take time to learn a new way to be in the world. And I was going to describe how I've heard people say, I've tried that, for example, learning a new way. I've tried that and it didn't work. And so I mentioned it's training. It may take a while. No, I tried it and it didn't work. And I like to play around with that a little bit, because who were you when you tried it? How long ago? What state of mind? What was going on in your life? What was the energy you put into it? Were you ambivalent? What did you believe about yourself at that time? And who are you now? And again, this speaks to developmental stages. And this is how it can get confusing for people. Developmental stages in contrast to us as source, or as Fred would call our true selves, right? It's who we are, but who we are in that moment, right? So I just wanted to mention that, because many people, or I've heard many people say, I tried that, it didn't work.
Well,
and then
I
it's
have
like,
a
okay,
story
when? Yes.
I have a story to share about that just recently happened to me. I have owned a book for probably 30 years. And when I bought it, it's a book kind of on communication and the structure of beliefs. And when I first read it, I started reading it and I thought, for a guy who is supposed to be teaching other people how to communicate, he sure is a poor communicator. That was my opinion in the 90s when I read it. I put the book away. I never finished it for the first time, and I'm just kind of, clearing out some clutter, and I'm looking at books that either I've read and I'm not going to read again, or that I started to read and never finished, and thinking they're better off at Goodwill or some used bookstore or something. And I opened this book up. This was about maybe 2 weeks ago, and I thought, I'm going to give this away. It just didn't make sense. And I just started reading it, and I'm like, oh, well, wow. And I kept reading it, and I kept reading it, and like I've finished it now, and the book is brilliant. So when you said, who were you when you tried that? Obviously the guy didn't like sneak into my room and rewrite the book and make it, he hasn't had, I mean, it's a book, not an ebook. And so that is such an awesome question. Who were you when you tried it? And
Thank you.
the check-in that I do, with my new clients, I just say, take your cell phone, set a countdown timer for 45 minutes. When it goes off, just take 5 seconds, or it doesn't even need to be that, really. Just see how you're doing. And most clients do that. They find it fascinating. And I've got a series of clients, a small, like 10% of the ones that I've worked with, who they're just not getting anywhere. They end up like saying, I don't want to work with you. I'm not getting the results that I want. And almost 100% of those people are the ones that I say, how are you doing on your check-ins? I'll follow up. And they're like, oh yeah, I was doing that for a day and a half, and then I just kind of stopped. I sort of forgot about it, to be honest with you. And I said, well, it's very helpful, try to use it. And that conversation just repeats itself over and over again. And often they will get to the point of saying, it seems like a useless task. And so that who are you, or who were you when you were trying that? Very interesting question I'm going to add to my own toolkit. So
Thank you. You
for
are
that.
welcome to steal.
All right, well, I'll give
But
you.
I notice when I hear you tell that story, I feel sad in my heart for the people who, since our topic today is presence and your relationship with yourself. And I immediately think, what kind of relationship do they have with themselves that they do not just take a few seconds to check in with themselves?
Yeah.
What's going on? Like I would want to meet what's going on with you in connection with that. Like, what are you telling yourself? What does it feel like? Who are you in connection with that task? Why does it seem like a burden to you? Why does it seem hopeless to you? Why do you not seem worth checking in with yourself? What's going on?
Yeah.
And spend some time there, because it seems to me there's probably gold there hidden under the surface, and they may not know. So I just notice in my heart, just like, oh, I would love to be with them in that and see what came up to the surface, if anything. And if not, I mean, again, who are you in this moment? What are you ready for? If it's not ready to surface, it's not. It's just when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, is the expression. I can't remember who said it, but so perhaps they're not ready. But sometimes just being with someone in something allows them to become ready in that moment. And so it comes to the surface, just knowing that there's someone there to catch them if they fall.
There was a neuroscientist I was listening to on an interview, and he said, we're really, our brains are amazing and powerful, and we think 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And creative stuff occasionally pops in. He says most of our problems result from the fact that of the 60,000 that we're thinking, 59,510 of them are the same ones that we thought yesterday and the day before. And it is easy to fall into a habitual pattern where you're just kind of going through the motions just because, that's the way that you do it. And it's easy. And it works until it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes we can help people see what they're not seeing. And I just want to bring, it doesn't have to be a traumatic thing. It can just be a habit and we don't even think about it. And so just making that visible can be enough. It doesn't have to be any big thing. But sometimes just that, maybe I'm going to bring a question, this idea of your relationship with yourself. If I am with someone, how can the way I am with you inform the way you are with you?
Could you ask that again?
How, Danielle's smiling. How can the way I am with you inform the way you are with you? So if I treat you, if I am with you with basically allowing. So when I say allowing, it's just being. I don't criticize. I don't judge. I don't make assumptions. And if I do, I check to see if my assumptions are correct or not. I don't assume and then assume that my assumption is correct. But I am with you. I'm speaking generally you. What happens to you? I'm just thinking for someone who maybe doesn't see their own value or isn't used to being treated in a way where they allow themselves that open, accepting space where just being is just being. What does that do with the way they treat themselves? And I think part of we talk about the therapeutic relationship, how therapy can and often will work better if there's a good relationship between the therapist and the client. And so I'm just sort of curious, I'm just asking the question, since we're talking about our relationship with ourselves, if I treat you well, if I treat you with an openness and acceptance and just a being, how do you then treat yourself? Because I would think somewhere on a cellular energetic level, it would have to do something.
Yeah.
And my attention is going to Danielle, actually, because Danielle, you work with horses. And you've mentioned before how they pick up on everything. So there's a sort of being with the horse and a being with the horse where, yeah. Do you know what I'm going towards? Do you know what I'm sort of talking about?
I do. There's a energetic and an emotional resonance with the horse, and they have no ability to lie, but they also have a very good memory. So there is that dynamic that their habitual way of being may have become protecting themselves because they have been in an abusive relationship. So then there's a very different dynamic. But and I don't know why I was thinking about this the other day, but there was a client when I was a horseshoer that I showed up to work on their horse, and the horse energy was way up here and the people's energy was way up here, and this was going to be a really difficult thing to do. And I was just like,
bring it down.
My work's not difficult. And as I worked with the horse, and it was very tense and concerned about what I was doing, anything done with this horse. And I think I probably didn't get all 4 feet trimmed. I probably just did the front 2 that day, because there, you can sense it. There's a point that they are not going to allow at this point, right? But the owners were like, just the way you talk, just the way you move around the horse, just all of that brings more peace to me, right? So I think it was because it took me a long time to actually hear when people were saying that I bring peace, right? Like, it was so intuitive to me, so natural to me. It was like a fish in water, right?
Mhm.
They're the last ones to recognize water because they're in it all the time.
Mm.
So I took a long time of striving to be what I thought I was supposed to be, instead of hearing that I was here to be peace. Like, I've landed into that in a way recently that I just couldn't, right? I couldn't see that. So when you say your heart hurts for these people, there's that, and then you're talking about a therapeutic situation, and I came into therapy on the heels of getting clean. So I didn't have any tools. I didn't have a real good concept of myself. And the therapist that I got, I was like, really?
Ah.
I got a male therapist. I do not want to work with a male therapist. And he was excellent, and he was patient, and it took me every bit of a year, I would say, before I began to trust him, and we actually began to get some things done. But he just let me take my time, and he offered me tools, and I used them or I didn't. And so that, as a professional, that's kind of the point that I have to come to be at peace with my work, is that if I offer you tools for personal peace and you don't pick them up, who am I to interfere with your happiness? I've offered you what I have. If you don't want it, I can't make you want it,
Mm.
you know? So
There's a
that gives,
respect in that.
yeah.
It's respecting that people are where they are, just like I am where I am at this moment or whatever moment. And if they're meant to take it or use it, they will at some point, but perhaps not now.
And you
And it's
don't know whether
no.
you've planted a seed that's gonna grow later. 30 years later, this person is gonna pick up this book. This person is
Yeah.
going to hear this video. You don't know your impact for sure. But to be, yeah, who am I to interfere with someone else's growth pattern? I mean, if they ask me to, that's one thing,
Mhm.
but I can't trespass on that and expect it to
Sadhu,
be successful.
sorry, I thought you were done. I do that every once in a while. Someone will pause and I think they finished the sentence and they haven't. So sorry about that.
No worries.
Sadhu Khalsa, he was with us at the beginning. I don't know. For those of you watching, you may remember him and you may not. He actually calls himself Sadhu Serves, and he focuses on serving. And he interviewed me, several months ago, and he asked me at one point, "So tell us how you serve, and describe your way of serving." And I sat there and I went, I don't serve. It made absolutely no sense to me to serve, at least my understanding of serve. I am. So whatever I bring to a situation is that. I don't serve, I be, I am. And if the person with me or people with me find some value in that and they take it and use it, great. And if not, that's great, because it's none of my business. I can care about them, I can wish them well, I can do all kinds of things, but what they do with who I am, that's up to them. So I don't serve. And that's how I see it anyway. But I can see your face, Bobby. So I'm curious what's going on there.
I was just thinking about how I might answer that question. And maybe it's like a different relationship with serve. But I think in the work that I do, and when I start working with a new client, I begin by telling them that my foundational understanding of our relationship is that the client, whoever they may be, is not broken, doesn't need to be fixed. They just temporarily don't have access to all of the resources that they have available. And so I would have answered that the way that I serve would be to create the space and the conversation and to potentially offer another perspective to help them get access to a little bit more, or oftentimes a lot more, resources. And when I'm doing trance work, which not all of the stuff that I do is hypnosis, some of it's kind of hypnotic coaching, which is much more conversational. But when I'm doing trance work, one of the ways that I describe that process to people is you and I are going to go on a journey together. You're going to be the one that is going to be seeing the resources. It's going to be making the shifts. It's going to be doing everything that's necessary. I'm along for the ride, and I'll be happy to be a guide. And I've got a really good flashlight. So, I can, if there's dark corners that haven't been explored for a while, I'll get the sense because I'm in trance with them, and it creates a really cool, intimate experience. And it's not a mind meld, and it's not mind reading, but it's not at all uncommon that like just the right thing will just pop up at the right moment. And I'll say, well, have you considered this? Or, what if you looked at it from this angle or whatever? And very often those aha moments and, flashes of insight and intuition get downloaded in an instant. And with many clients, one session, 2 sessions can have a pretty big impact, because it is, as soon as you make the shift, like I was thinking earlier as you all were talking, that, we often live from the perspective when we're over identified with the body. One of the key ways of knowing that we're over identified is that if we have the feeling that our emotions are telling us about our circumstances, that, I'm upset right now because somebody was mean to me, or I'm happy right now because I got a financial windfall of some sort. That's the conditioning. Whereas if we make just a little shift in that and realize that when somebody says something that's kind of innocuous that triggers me, that's telling me, and I get upset, that's telling me about how I'm doing on the inside. Little reflection, no really real reflection on them. It's all pointing to me. So, as we make the shift, that life isn't happening to us, it's flowing through us. That little shift can, it is one of those small hinges that swings big doors.
I'd like to come back to Danielle as we're getting towards the closing of the hour. I heard you talk about you didn't know that you brought peace. You didn't know you were peace until you did. That's my paraphrasing of it, basically. And again, since the theme is presence and your relationship with yourself, I have a thought about this becoming present to who you are, or your true self, or whatever you want to call it, or an aspect, a quality of you. Would you mind saying something about what that was like when that sort of understanding or experience of, oh, I am this? What was that like for you?
It's been a very long, slow journey for me. And I hope to um, serve in a way that people don't have to take as long. They don't have to have traumatic experiences to wake up. They don't have to have some of the slow crawl. I do think that there's a certain amount of devotion to your own expansion that takes that kind of energy. Like, I'm just going to be to it. I don't have to see results. I'm just going to be committed to me. I'm going to be devoted to me. I'm going to arrive where I'm supposed to be. I don't, like I said, I struggle a little more with language now than I used to. But for me, and I probably really landed into it 20 years ago. But for the first 10 of it, I was like, yeah, so right? Like, it helps me in my family and it helps me with my horses, but I didn't see it as a gift, right?
Mm.
I just
Mm.
it was still just part of my personality. So it took me those next 10 years, I think, to undo the personality and get to, oh, that is me. That's the
Mm-hmm.
essence of me. That's the vibration of me. Like, some people have different gifts, they have different vibrations about them. Even though we are one, we are sort of unique streams of frequency or vibration or whatever you want to say to that. Like, some people have a different, um, my daughter, for instance, if I had to say her essence is joy. So
Mm.
mine would be peace, but hers would be joy. You put us together, we have a great time, right? But
Wow.
I can be I can be who I am with her and she can be who she is with me and we don't question that. So we've had an interesting time going through the brain game together and
Wow.
getting to be the dolphins, and say, this is who I came to be and this is who I'm going to be. And it's wonderful and it's joyful and it's easy. But yeah, for the first 20 years from the time that I chose that as my identity, the possibility of peace for myself and all people, like, I chose that in the landmark education thing that I went through. And then for years, I didn't really do anything with it. And then for the last several, it's just been like, I describe myself as the tortoise and the tortoise in the hare, right? I'm going to get there. But in the last few years, I strapped some wings on that tortoise and we took it.
I love it. So I've heard you bring up some points. Like, I love the part about the personality that you mentioned, and I'm noticing that we're at the end of the hour, and we really need to bring this topic up again at part two or part three in the
Really.
Or
Presence Posse. We need
four.
to come back. There's tons of stuff we haven't even broached yet in this arena. There's, of course, relationships with ourselves. There's going to be a lot to say. So I thought, since I'm with you, Danielle, how would you like to round off by saying something about yourself and perhaps something you're offering at the moment, or a little bit more about you?
Thank you for that opportunity. I am teaching Mastering the Brain Game right now. I'll be offering that again in the fall. But what the missing piece for me right now is how I integrate my peace coaching and my horsemanship. And several of you have probably heard me here say before, I'm becoming a people whisperer. Like, I'm a horse whisperer, and people have these same challenges and living in an unnatural environment. If we're spiritual beings and having a human journey, we don't know what we're doing, right? So we have to remember that. And so there's some tools that are very effective that the horses can bring. So I'm doing a retreat June 11th here in Michigan on my farm, and we're looking to have about 10 people we're hoping. And the woman I'm working with was also certified with me in equine assisted life coaching back in November. But we're kind of taking it another step and gonna own the beyond the physical relationship between people and horses. And so it's all coming together, and it's very exciting.
Oh, I would love to do that, but it's going to be a bit too far from Oslo, Norway, to get there.
Yeah, well,
Another
I come
chance.
do one in Norway.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Thank you very much, Danielle. Bobby, how about you?
The easiest way to, if you're interested in exploring my contact information, is down there. But really, the easiest way is 2 groups that I've got on Facebook. I've got one that's been going for about a year called Our Mindful Life. And that's really all about what we've been talking about today, our how we are doing on the inside. In my work, I call that the inner game. And I just started a new group. I had licensed my outer game stuff to a brokerage firm a while back. And they wanted exclusive. They said, I'd done talks with them, and they're like, we only want you working with us. And I said, well, okay, if you write a check big enough, I'm happy to do that. And they did, and that contract's over. And so now I'm going back out and teaching the outer game again. And I have just created a brand new group on Facebook called Secrets of Hypnotic Influence and Persuasion. And what that is about, it's not about selling or, any kind of that type of technique. Rather, what it's about is hypnosis is a very elegant form of communication. And in order to be a hypnotist or a hypnotherapist, you really have got to be able to create that open environment that we've mentioned several times here while we've been talking. So for corporate leaders and entrepreneurs and people who are in the selling process, that's a cool thing that you can explore of how to use the principles behind hypnosis. I'm not teaching you hypnosis in that group, but it uses the principles behind trance to help you communicate more effectively and more influentially. So that one's Secrets of Hypnotic Influence and Persuasion. Got a big ship on the cover.
Excellent. Thank you. And both of you, of course, can put links to and information about your pages or groups and events in the Presence Posse, the free Presence Posse Facebook group, so that people who are watching and people are
How
interested
would one get a hold of you if they're interested in diving deeper?
Thank you very much. Well, my information is at the bottom of the screen here now. I have a group called Relation Revolution, and it's any kind of relationship. It's relationships with others, relationship with ourselves. Of course, that was the topic today. I do a lot of different things. One of them is, we were talking about how we give people tools and sometimes they don't use them. And one of the things I do is to help connect people to the life they want to have, they say they want to have, and actually do the things that they say they want to do. Part of it is just getting through the boundaries and the hindrances they put up so that they can actually start living the life and creating the life that they want. So that's one of the things I do. I have started a group, or I will be starting a class, and it's focusing on regret. I've called it No More Regret. We'll be working on letting regret go. And it's all kinds of regret. It's anything from I regret not having lost weight to I regret not having said goodbye to my parent before my parent died. I regret having said something that I really wish I hadn't said. It's any kind of regret, and we'll be working on that. So if that's an interesting theme for you, you're welcome to contact me, and I can put some more information about that in the Facebook group, The Presence Posse. So, otherwise, thank you everyone who has been with us on our journey today, talking about presence and your relationship with yourself. And we will return to this topic at a later time. We'll let you know. Next week's topic, we will be back same time, same place. The topic will be presence and rejection.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a biggie. Presence and rejection. So we welcome you to join us again next Monday, the Presence Posse, in our free Facebook group, the Presence Posse. And until then, we wish you a good week. And thanks again, everyone. And thank you to you, Bobby and Danielle, for today's talk.
And
Yeah,
thank
thank
you
you,
for
Miriam.
being a wonderful mistress of ceremonies.
Oh, thank you very much. Bye, everybody.